Well, technology. Isn't it great when it works? I'm sitting there thinking, I think one day, Kelly, you might want to hear this. One day, maybe in February, just a good enough reason, we're going to have an old-fashioned day. No computer. We come on, if you got a pair of overalls, put on your overalls. Guitar. Well, we got piano. Piano works. Got a harmonica. You can play the guitar, and we'll break out the hymnals. I'm looking up here, and I'm seeing. We got. I know we got more back there, but we got plenty of hymnals. So, well, you remember the days? I remember. Of course, when I was growing up, same as y'all. I didn't. We're all about the same age. Well, some of you are older than dirt, but the rest of us aren't. We're young seedlings yet. I can remember the days sitting in pews, and all we had was hymnals. I learned that I sing up there because I learned to sing because of the hymnal. I learned to be able to follow the notes. I can't tell you what the name of the note is, the chord or anything like that, but in my mind, I know that this note at the middle bar of the staff, I know that note sounds like, and I work off of that, and that's how I sing. And over the 50 years or so that I've been doing it, I think I've gotten fairly decent at it. So, I miss the hymnals. I do. I miss we do some of the songs from time to time, but, there's some great songs. There's some great theology. And not that modern Christian music, I won't say gospel because gospel tends to lean toward old Southern style, which is kind of what I'm talking about. The modern Christian music, while it has some great thoughts and inspiration to talk about, it's not necessarily long on theology. There is some theology there usually, but it's not all the way through. To me, and I know I'm speaking to the proverbial choir here. To me, there's too much repetition in all kinds of modern music. Period. If you said it one time, let's say it 5 more times, and everybody will get to understand it. So, I think let's set it up on the calendar for one of the Sundays in February for an old-fashioned Sunday, and we'll wear our cowboy boots. I noticed Steve's wearing cowboy boots. He's right there already. Don't have to. I think I'm pretty loud. I think I can speak up to where you can hear me. So we can just move you a little closer if we have to. I just think let's go back to our roots one day, and just see how that flies. We're an older congregation, so our heyday, so to speak, has long passed. So let's go back and relive some of that, okay? I'm just sitting here, computers are nice. I work on computers all day long, and they're great when they work. And when they're not working, they are frustrating as all get out. And sometimes they're frustrating even when they do work. So that's just a thought, I think we'll do that. So does sound like fun. Any other instruments that we can play in here? I mean, we got a piano, we got a guitar, y'all got harmonicas. Anybody else play anything? We need a banjo. Well, Kelly can play the flute. We never have gotten Peter to play the violin for us. Can you do the fiddle? Can you fiddle on it? Oh, well, well, yeah, there you go. Charlie Daniels, I imagine he sings pretty good too. Little devil goes down to Georgia. So we could have us a good old time. Maybe we'll have. Well, there you go. Got it. Anybody got a Jew's harp? Anybody got it? Huh? We're all Jews. We're grafted in. We're all Jews. But the Jews, anybody know what a Jew's harp is? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, we'll have us a good time. All right. As I told you earlier, especially after I got done with the message last week, I'm thinking, wow. According to the book of John, we're heading into Easter. And we're heading right now, physically, into Thanksgiving. Those two, they don't match up real well. So I'm postponing John until after the first of the year. And actually, that'll work out pretty well because you pick up John in chapter 12, and you go 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, and 17. So you get into his, 3-chapter prayer? Something like that. And it's very deep. Very deep, and it'll lead us up into the chronological Easter, even in our scriptures, so it'll fit a lot better. So today, naturally, we're going to talk a little bit about Thanksgiving. We're going to have us a nice celebration on Tuesday here as a church, so everybody come hungry. If this is make sure everybody that's not here is here. That's a 28-pound bird. Right now, you've got to eat more than a pound. A turkey. I've already overstuffed myself on navy bean soup. Although turkey's not quite as harmful, except it puts you to sleep. So, of course, we're going to have it at night so you can sleep good that night. So, what, the turkey? The soup? The rest of that. I'm sorry, if y'all want to come by and get a cup of bean soup, you better hurry because that was the second eating on it as it was, and so it's not going to last past the day probably. Our daughter kind of doesn't like to do leftovers too long. She's kind of self-conscious about it. Don't want it to go bad. Me, if it smells okay, I'll eat it. It doesn't help the fact that I can't smell anything, but yeah, well, I worked around chemicals too long when I was young. Well, she'll eat anything. So I worked for an exterminating company when I was young, and I worked in a warehouse where I mixed the chemicals. And around them chemicals all the time, I can't smell nothing. I mean, my smeller is gone. I just kind of ruined it. So, yeah. So sometimes it's a blessing, but yeah. All right. So we, as we concluded chapter 11 last week of John, and in January we'll pick up chapter 12. So that brings us today to being thankful. Something that we should be all the time. Being thankful or grateful is often something that we don't give the proper attention to. Too often, we give lip service to saying thanks. I mean, waitress brings you your meal. Well, thank you. Did you really mean that? I mean, she's getting paid for it, and we understand that, and we just, out of courtesy, I guess, say thank you. But is it really heartfelt? Well, let's look at a little bit of biblical perspective today about giving thanks. As we come together on Tuesday for our meal here, and then on Thursday for whatever kind of celebration you'll be having in your homes, or some of you may be traveling, like Fuzzy over there, traveling and won't be here, so we'll just have to eat his share. What do we know about Thanksgiving? What do you understand about Thanksgiving? I'm talking about the day now. How did Thanksgiving originate? Pilgrims, 1621 to be exact. William Bradford was the governor of the colony of Massachusetts. And in December 13th, 1621, he declared that day to be a day of feasting and prayer to show the gratitude of the colonists that they were still alive. This was the first winter, or actually it was going into the second winter. The first winter that the colonists were here, they came across the pond with 102 people. And in that first year, they lost 44. It was a rough time. It got down to the point where they had 5 kernels of corn apiece per day for their food. 5 kernels of corn. They were in bad shape. Fortunately, as God would provide, there was a trading ship that came and had plenty of grain, and they traded beaver pelts for the grain. Got them through the winter. So when it came to 1621, and Governor Bradford decided to give thanks that God had provided, and he brought them through the summer and brought them into the fall where they had a harvest. They were very fortunate in a lot of ways. God provided many things that you would not really expect. Because here they were in the new land. I know we have people in our country who are really anti-American, and they disparage the fact that the Pilgrims came from England or Spain or Holland or someplace over there and came over here to colonize. And in doing so, they say they displaced the Native Americans. Now, I understand that there's some of that So that does go on. In fact, I've got Native American heritage myself. My grandmother was a half Cherokee, so I've got Indian blood. But as they came, they were fortunate enough to land up there at Plymouth Rock, and the area had some fertile ground, and it also was an area where the Native Americans were not hostile. Good thing for newcomers. We think about a lot of the westerns we see on TV when they moved west, the Apaches and the Comanches and the Sioux, and they didn't necessarily appreciate the white guy coming in and taking over their land. So they were fortunate in that they had non-hostile Native Americans. And in fact, if you know about history, if you read history, there was one very famous Indian at that time. His name was Squanto. Squanto had, in years prior to that, been apparently, I would imagine it was the Spanish had come through, and they had captured Squanto and probably others and taken them to Europe to be slaves. Squanto escaped from them over there and made his way to England, where he learned English. He joined the Plymouth colonies, or the Newfoundland company that came back to start the colony. And when he got back to North America, he found that his tribe that he had belonged to had been wiped out by disease. So he's kind of by himself. Well, he joined up with the Plymouth colony. And being an Indian who could speak Indian, and one who had lived in England could speak English, he became the emissary between the Indians and the Plymouth colony, Governor Branford. He was quite famous. He was a gifted interpreter, and he also served as a guide as they branched out to explore the areas. So when it came to 1621, the colonists were rightfully grateful, thankful that God had provided for them. And as we come down through the time in our country, Abraham Lincoln decided that the last Thursday of November in 1863 would be a day of thanksgiving and praise to our beneficent Father. We've come a long way. Now our government doesn't want to acknowledge God in any way, shape, or form. And yet, back then, it was a lot different. They did acknowledge that God was our provider. Well, in 1941, they decided to make the fourth Thursday of the month of November officially Thanksgiving, and that is continued on today. When we think about Thanksgiving according to Scripture, you have to go all the way back, really, to Exodus chapter 15 to really start seeing a picture of how people became thankful. I mean, there were other instances, I'm sure, before, especially as Abraham would have, been thankful for the stuff that he was led through and all those kind of things. But really, in Exodus chapter 15, we find the people of the Exodus singing a song. The whole chapter 15, they're singing a song of thanksgiving for God delivering them from Egypt and the oppression that they've been living under. Thankfulness was incorporated earlier than that, but this was a major event. The first instance, really, of a great thanksgiving came in Exodus chapter 12, where preparing for the Exodus, what happened? They had a bunch of plagues. And that 10th plague was one where God told Moses, I'm going to kill all the firstborn. Unless you sacrifice a lamb, paint your doorpost with the blood from the lamb. Then when the death angel comes by, he'll pass over. Pass over. The Jews had 3 major Thanksgiving holidays. We've got one, and we don't even observe it properly. In Exodus chapter 12, computer's back up. I was just looking to see. So you can follow along. This day shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations, as a statute forever. You shall keep it as a feast. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove leaven out of your houses. For if anyone eats what is leavened from the first day until the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. On the first day you shall hold a holy assembly, and on the 7th day a holy assembly. No work shall be done on these days, but what everyone needs to eat, that alone may be prepared for you. And you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your hosts out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as a statute forever. So the Jews have observed this almost all of their history, especially after they came out of Egypt. But there were 2 other times of feasting and celebration in thanks. One, if you elect, I don't think I have it in the screen. In fact, I'm not going to read it, so I don't. Leviticus chapter 23 tells us about the Feast of Harvest, or Pentecost. If you know your Jewish calendar at all, you know Passover occurs April, May, March, April, May, so we're right in that area. And then after Passover, 50 days later, comes Pentecost. Pentecost was a time to celebrate the harvest, the planting, the harvest. And they would observe it every year. And this was also, I believe, one of the ones that they had to travel to Jerusalem for. The third, which occurs in October, which we just passed last month, was called the Feast of Tabernacles, or Booths. And it was to commemorate that harvest that they celebrated at the beginning back at Pentecost. So they celebrated 3 major holidays of Thanksgiving. When it comes to the Old Testament, though, the Old Testament is so full. In fact, the whole Bible really is so full of giving thanks that you can't hardly turn anywhere without seeing those words. Thanks. Perhaps the most prolific author who spoke about thanks was David. In Psalm 136, he says, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. Give thanks to the God of gods, for his steadfast love endures forever. Give thanks to the Lord of lords, for his steadfast love endures forever." He continues that for about 20 verses or so. Then in Psalm 30, he says, "You have turned for me my mourning into dancing. You have loosed my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness, that my glory may sing your praises and not be silent. O Lord, my God, I will give thanks to you forever. Now, why would David be so thankful? Well, if you had studied David with us a little while back over the summer, David was anointed by God to be king when he was fairly young, in his teenage years. And Saul, the current king, brought him under his wing there for a while, had him play music and everything and calm him down. But then he got angry and he disliked him and tried to kill him. And so while Saul was king and David was the anointed king, David didn't even try to take the throne. It was his rightful throne. But yet, he was thankful, continuously thankful. You would be thankful that God protected him while Saul was trying to kill him. And even when he came to his throne, he was thankful because he was always at war, and God would deliver them. Another person who was very thankful was Job. We think of Job, of course, as being the one who lost everything. And yet in chapter 1, after all these things had happened, his family had been killed, his possessions destroyed, that livestock gone, afflicted, he says, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. How is it that these ones who were so persecuted and so mistreated and yet protected by God, how is it that they are so thankful and we live life haphazardly with just a cursory thanks? We need to think about our lives and how God has worked in our lives and to truly give him thanks. When you have Thanksgiving dinner this week, you'll probably get up in the morning while the bird's cooking and watch the parade. Everybody watches the parade. You know, Santa Claus be on the back end waving, and Thanksgiving's over before it even starts. The dog show. I don't get that far. Well, maybe you watch the dog show with Debbie. No, in fact, I don't usually stick around for the parade very much, but of course my wife will watch the parade, so it will be on. And then after the parade, of course, the men of the family will probably be watching the football game. I don't know who's playing, don't care. It's gotten to the point where I don't care about professional football at all, and I'm getting a little more about college football since they've gone to this NIL stuff, and it's just there's nothing out there good to be a fan of anymore. Baseball was always my best one, and now Juan Soto's asking for $600 million. I'm sorry, I can't watch a bunch of rich guys going out there and play a little boy's game. It's just depressing. For that, I can't be thankful. But when we go through this process on Thanksgiving Day, we need to be truly thinking about God, because he is the one to whom we need to be thankful. In the New Testament, Paul was probably one of the most thankful people that you would ever encounter. And yet, Paul has something in common with David and with Job. He was persecuted. He was imprisoned. He was beaten and flogged and shipwrecked, all these things. And yet, 2 Corinthians 2 says, but thanks be to God who in Christ always leads us in triumphal procession, and through us spreads the fragrance of the knowledge of him everywhere. And then the author of Hebrews, which may have been Paul, maybe, says in Hebrews 12, therefore let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. And thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe. That's thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a universal act of appreciation. We're thankful when someone gives us a gift. We're thankful that, Christmas time comes and we get gifts, and birthdays and pastors, we get gifts. I thank every one of you for what you've done for me this past October. I do so appreciate it. It's great to be thought of and remembered for being here, and I love each of you. And we're just thankful. We're thankful. Being thankful causes us to reflect on our worth in the eyes of others. But when it comes to God, we're thankful because we're thankful for who he is and what he has done, specifically for us. James puts it this way: every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Of his own will he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. We thank God because he is the provider of the good gifts. We don't think about, you got up this morning and you took that first breath. That was a gift. That was a gift. As we get older, we start to realize that even more and more. God's provision for us is so great that we take it for granted. That's the issue. We got to give thanks, because giving thanks reminds us that we are weak. Unfortunately, we're also selfish and covetous. If we're not giving our thanks properly, those things that we desire, we desire them covetously. We got to be thankful for what we have, and then for how we are blessed. We live in a world where self-satisfaction, to get the word right, is number one priority in most people's lives. When you watch TV, what do you see? An advertisement that tells you need to buy this coat. You need to buy this car. You need to buy this, whatever it is. You need it. It will satisfy you. It will make you pretty. It will make you happy. It will make you successful. How can we pass that up? I want to be happy and successful, and I can't say pretty, but there ain't enough makeup out there in the world to fix that. But 1 Thessalonians tells us we're to be thankful in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. My question is, what are you thankful for? I'll take a response. Family. You're thankful for family, okay? Thankful for each day. Yes, God, we're thankful, God, for our families that you provide for us, for the very rising of the sun in the morning that heralds in a new day. Thank you, Lord. What else? What are we thankful for? Okay, having a good mate. Yes. Yes. Good friends. Food and shelter. There are a lot of people who don't have food and shelter. Good health, or relatively good anyway. Some of us, I don't know we call it good, but I'm thankful for what it is. Anything else? Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's what we're thankful for. We need to be thankful for the things that we take for granted. Too often we get caught up in the mundane, in the habitual, without being thankful. Luke 17, this may seem a little bit out of context here with what we're talking about, but I think it really applies if I explain it right. Luke 17, Jesus was talking, and he says, "Will any one of you who has a servant plowing or keeping sheep say to him, when he has come in from the field, 'Come at once and recline at table'? Will he rather not say to him, 'Prepare supper for me and dress properly and serve me while I eat and drink, and afterward you will eat and drink'? Does he thank the servant because he did what was commanded? Does he thank the servant because he did what was commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were commanded, say, 'We are unworthy servants. We have only done what was our duty.'" Most of us are probably not actively working anymore. We're mostly retired. I know there's a few who are still working. I still work myself. Do we give thanks that we're able to continue? And do we take the boss for granted? If the boss takes the servant for granted, we might get offended. As in what Jesus was saying here, as the servant comes in, would you expect him to do something other than what you hired him to do? You see, the relationship between an employer and an employee is a contract, whether you realize that or not. It's a contract. The employer says, "I have this that I want to get done, and I will pay you this to do it." And you say, "Okay, I need to have a job that pays. Okay, I'll accept your job, and this is our contract. I will do it. You will pay. If I don't do it, you don't have to pay." So is it fair for an employer to say, "Well, you did your job, now I want you to do this for nothing"? It's not fair. Nor is it fair for the worker who's supposed to put in 8 hours to take a 2-hour break. That's why unions form, to legitimize the break. That's why. So we have to understand that being thankful sometimes incorporates doing our duty or having a duty. I was thankful I worked for the post office for 37 years. Didn't necessarily like it. I liked it when I was out on the street. That was fine. When I was in the office, forget it. But for 37 years, I was thankful because it provided for my family. God provided me with the ability to go out there in the 110-degree heat and the storms and everything else and do this menial job, and yet he blessed my family through it. Jesus followed up that story, or that parable, with another. and this was not a parable, this was a story of something that apparently happened. Still in chapter 17 of Luke, he says, on the way to Jerusalem, he was passing along between Samaria and Galilee, and as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers, who stood at a distance and lifted up their voices, saying, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. When we saw them, he said to them, go and show yourselves to the priests. And as they went, they were cleansed. Then one of them, when he saw he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice, and he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus answered, were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? And he said to him, rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well. Sometimes we fail to give thanks where it is most appropriate. The one leper, the Samaritan, surprisingly enough, they're somewhere around Jerusalem, between Jerusalem and Samaria. You know, the lepers would gather as lepers, not necessarily as Samaritans and Jews. Their common bond was leprosy. So out of these 10, it's implied that he's the only foreigner. And yet, not being a believing Jew, he was the one who was grateful. Sometimes we need to realize that what God has given to us, we didn't deserve. And those 9 weren't even thankful for that. We got to understand that God is not under an obligation to do anything for us. He's already done everything he needs to do. So what we take for granted, we need to be thankful for. Now, as part of our celebration of Thanksgiving, I thought, wouldn't it be good for us to be thankful in observing the Lord's Supper this morning? Glenn, if you'll come. Our model is Jesus, who was thankful all the time. He thanked God for the food that when he broke it for the 5,000. He thanked God for the bread and the wine of the Last Supper. He even thanked God for hearing his prayer as he raised Lazarus. What we looked at last week said, so they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. He was setting an example, giving thanks. So today, as we observe the Lord's Supper, let's be thankful in advance of Thanksgiving. And let's be thankful every day, because the blood, represented by the grape juice, and his body that he gave for us. He did not have to do it. He did it willingly for you and for me.